about to begin turn 8 here in Streets of Shadows. This is the situation on the map. There's a significant number of units from all factions. On the map, I've placed silver pawns, as you see there, at Notre Dame to signify landmarks, so I don't count them for initiative purposes. And other types of pawns at Wehrmacht Central, as well as in the Gestapo prison, because none of those marked spaces count for initiative. All others are fair game. We've seen that the chief of police has lost his headquarters at Ile de la Cité, and the same has happened to the fashion designer, who's lost his headquarters at Montparnasse, and control of headquarters, as stated before, is essential to win this game. They produce 3 victory points, so any side or any faction that doesn't control its headquarters will have a very uphill battle in order to have a chance to win. And the liberation marker is in the initial box of the mid-war stage. And as to initiative, the Cabaret Impresario has a clear advantage, controls 8 locations. So the Cabaret Impresario will retain the initiative, and he has had the initiative for a few turns, and having the initiative in this turn has, of course, its advantages. Next to the Shadows phase, and we reveal the next card in the Shadows deck. Troop movements, and during plot resolution, if a player or collaborating players control all train stations, they may advance the Allied liberation marker 1 space or elect not to do so. There's 2 train locations on the map, and both are uncontrolled. The one at Montparnasse and the train location at Tuileries. On to the income phase, and only the Cabaret Impresario and the journalist have complex dominance. After adding each of the factions' incomes, the Cabaret Impresario has 10 francs, the movie director 8, the fashion designer and chief of police 6, and the journalist 5. So on to the recruitment phase. Cabaret Impresario has a full hand of 4 cards, so he won't be bidding in the upcoming bidding phase, but he has 10 francs, so he purchases 3 units, and in order to take that train station located at Montparnasse, he places 2 units at the Eiffel Tower, and the remaining unit at his headquarters at République, which is near the other train station location at Tuileries. Now the fashion designer has room for 1 more card, so he will be bidding, so he will only purchase 1 unit, which he places at the Eiffel Tower, and that increases his forces that can attack the movie director and hopefully recover his lost headquarters. The movie director also has a full hand of cards, so he will purchase 3 units. He will place 2 at his headquarters at Bercy and 1 at the Arc de Triomphe. The chief of police has room for 1 card, so he will purchase 1 unit and will place it here at Notre Dame, near his former headquarters. The journalist has room for 2 cards. The journalist has 5 francs, and it is unlikely that he'll be able to get 2 cards in this turn, so he recruits 1 unit and places the unit at Notre Dame. Now on to the bidding phase. And here we see the cards that are up for auction. And the Cabaret Impresario and the movie director, because they have full hands, will not be bidding in this phase. Here we see the results of the bidding. The fashion designer was able to pick up the treachery card, and with that, he has a full hand. The chief of police was able to pick up a resistance card, and now he has a full hand. And then the journalist was able to pick up 2 cards, even though he had very few francs. And with the second intelligence card, now he has a full hand, and that means that no one could bid on the last card, which in a regular name would be unknown to them, was a raid card. So the raid card goes back into the draw pile. It's the end of the bidding phase, and the cabaret impresario has a full hand of 4 cards. And notice he only has a raid card, but he needs another suited card in order to be able to attack so that he doesn't burn the raid card in an ordinary non-headquarters attack. So his special ability allows him to discard 1 action card, and he will discard 1 resistance card in order to draw another card from the action deck. So we draw the top card from the action deck, and it is another raid card. It's the end of the bidding phase, and we move on to the player turn phase. So we start with the cabaret impresario. Now he has 2 raid cards, and he could use 1 to attack a headquarters and the second one to effect the attack, but that would burn 2 precious raid cards. Does he have to attack a headquarters at this time? No. Cabaret impresario wants to take both train station spaces, so he moves 1 of his units from his headquarters to the train station at Tuileries and moves the second unit he has at his cabaret at La Villette to that same train station space. In addition, the cabaret impresario moves 2 of his units at the Eiffel Tower to the train station space located in the same district, Montparnasse. Wanting to retain the initiative, he moves his unit at Arc de Triomphe to the Hotel Lorraine. And his unit at the Paris Opera is moved to the adjacent Batignolles district at Café Foch. And finally, his unit at Notre Dame is moved to the adjacent Bastille district to the Hotel Alsace. So the cabaret impresario has taken control of many locations, and it's going to be hard for any of the other players to surpass him. That means the cabaret impresario may have the initiative for a while. Next is the fashion designer. Here we see his hand has an influence and a treachery card, but no raid card with which he could attempt to recover his own headquarters. In this game, you have to play cards in order to get rid of them, so he will play his treachery card, and he's going to pick 1 action card from an opposing player and place it in his hand. We will determine that randomly, and the movie director will be 1, chief of police 2, journalist 3, cabaret impresario 4. And the roll is a 5, so we roll again, and it's a 1. So it's a card from the movie director. And again, it will be determined randomly from left to right. This is 1 and this is 4. The roll again is a 5, and this time it's a 4. And the card is The Usual Suspects. And this card can be used as a raid card. So the treachery card that was played goes to the discard pile, and we add The Usual Suspects to the fashion designer's hand. With these 2 cards, the fashion designer now can attack a headquarters, and that includes his former headquarters. So, the fashion designer will move his 2 elite units from the movie director's location at Montparnasse at large, so that they will attack the fashion designer's former headquarters. He will move 1 of his units from the Eiffel Tower into the movie director's location there, and units in the Eiffel Tower will join in the attack. Also, joining in the attack will be the elite unit at the fashion designer's location here at Passy. And the unit at the Eiffel Tower will move to the fashion designer's location at that district. Now we execute the attack. It is 7 against 3. And the fashion designer now plays his Usual Suspect card, which will act as a raid card, and this influence card for the attack with a total strength of 4, and those are placed face down. Now the movie director has to choose whether to play 0, 1, 2, or 3 cards, and we leave it to chance. He'll play all 3 cards if a 6 is rolled, 2 on a 4 or 5, 3 on a 3 or 2 and no cards on a 1. And the roll is a 6, plays all 3 cards. Movie director plays all 3 cards, and now we reveal the cards of both sides. And the fashion designer has a total defense of 3 for the units plus 5 for the cards. That's 8. Meanwhile, the fashion designer has a total attack strength of 7 for the units plus 4. That's 11. So the fashion designer wins. We eliminate all movie director units, and the fashion designer has taken back his headquarters. Now the fashion director regains complex dominance. On to the movie director. He has no cards left, which is never good because it signals weakness to your opponents. His headquarters seems pretty safe with 4 units. He doesn't have a lot of units in other places on the map, and he doesn't have complex dominance because the police chief has an elite unit at the movie director's location at Batignolles. With nothing to move, no cards to play, the movie director just passes. And on to the chief of police. The chief of police is in a predicament. He has his maximum hand size of 5 cards. 4 of these are resistance and denunciation cards, which are not playable until their corresponding event is revealed from the Shadows deck, and that hasn't happened. So he only has this treachery card. And he has a special ability that any suited card can be played as a raids card. And that's important because he needs to take back his headquarters, but you need to also add a suited card when you attack a headquarters. So he doesn't have space for that suited card in his hand. And he can't play any of these cards because the enabling events have not happened. So he's pretty much stuck with his hand until any of those cards that trigger those denunciation or resistance cards appears in the Shadows deck. Can, of course, try to bring units over to the vicinity of Ile de la Cité, so when he does have the necessary cards, he can launch the attack on his former headquarters. So he will move his unit at Arc de Triomphe into the metro station, and that unit will reappear in the metro station at Ile de la Cité and move into Notre Dame. Similarly, he will move his unit at the Paris Opera into the metro station there, and that unit will appear here in the metro station at Ile de la Cité and also finish at Notre Dame. The journalist has a full hand of 6 cards. This Berlin Axis card is not usable because he doesn't control the Le Bourget airport. And this other card is not playable because he's the last player in this action phase, so it won't affect anyone. So he has to create some space and try to get rid of these weak cards like this influence card. So he will play this influence card and he will move one of his tokens into Wehrmacht Central. And he will move one of his units from the Paris Opera into Wehrmacht Central. And that's one of the spaces that you cannot enter unless you play that influence card. And he'll also play this intelligence card to examine the next Shadows card. So the journalist takes a peek at the next Shadows card, Allied Landings in the Med. During plot resolution, each player that has forces in a train station or airport has to discard 1 card from their hand, maximum 1 card per player, and the Allied Liberation marker will advance. That means that the greedy cabaret impresario who has at least 1 unit in each one of these 3 locations is going to lose 1 card. But of course, only the journalist knows this. So in a real game, the journalist places his card back in the draw pile and nobody else knows but the journalist what card it is. So the journalist has played 2 cards of his full allotment of 6, so he has space for 2 more cards during the next bid phase. And of course he wants to beef up his defenses at the former chief of police's headquarters. So his unit at Notre Dame will move there. And with so many factions having so many units and cards, it's probably a good idea for the journalists to strengthen their headquarters, so their unit from the Paris Opera moves into its headquarters at Batignolles. On to the plot and turn resolution phase. Now we effect the event truth movements. If a player or collaborating players control all train stations, they may advance the Allied liberation marker one space or elect not to do so. The Cabaret Impresario controls both train station locations, the one at Montparnasse and the one at Tuileries. And he decides to advance the Allied liberation marker to the number 6 box. That's the end of turn 8. Now we move on to turn 9, onto the initiative phase, and the Cabaret Impresario controls 13 locations which are not landmarks, so he's way ahead in number of locations controlled. He is also the player with the most units on the map. On to the shadows phase. And we reveal the card. Each player who has any forces in a train station or airport must discard one card from their hand. And the Allied liberation marker will be advancing during this turn. The Cabaret Impresario controls the airport and both train stations, so he must discard one card from his hand. That might not be a bad thing for him, because he can find more use for that extra space in his hand if he discards one of these denunciation or resistance cards. On to the income phase, and we add income to each of the factions. The Cabaret Impresario has 9 francs, followed by the fashion designer with 7, the movie director with a 6, and then the journalist and chief of police lagging behind with 3. On to the recruitment phase. Cabaret Impresario goes first, and there's only 5 units left in the Cabaret Impresario's supply. So he recruits 3 units, he places 1 at his headquarters. It's always good to guard your headquarters, and the remaining 2 near locations that are still empty and can be taken like these Abwehr locations at Montmartre and the Tuileries. So the other 2 units go to the Paris Opera. Next is the fashion designer. He just retook his headquarters, and he has strong units on the map as shown here, 3 elite units, so he won't be recruiting any units. He'll leave his 7 francs for the bidding phase. Next is the movie director. He has no cards and only 6 francs, so he will not be purchasing any units either. Now we move on to the chief of police. He has that problem that he cannot play 4 of his 5 cards, and he has a full hand. He has 3 francs, which is very little, so he cannot bid on any card, so he'll purchase 1 unit and places it also at Notre Dame. There's a large concentration of police units there. The journalist only has 3 francs, and he has room for 2 cards. So he will not be purchasing any units at this time. Now we move on to the bidding phase. Note that the Cabaret Impresario has a full hand of 4 cards, so he will not be bidding, and I will mark his card as so. We see the 5 cards that will be auctioned. Among them there is a prison break card, and that card allows the player to move all tokens for all factions from the Gestapo prison to their headquarters, and if a faction does not control their headquarters, they can be moved to 1 landmark. That seems a pretty handy event to have whenever the denunciation cards can be played and units will be shipped to Gestapo prison. And we're here conducting the auction, which normally I conduct off camera using this table here because it's been randomized. But because this card is coming up and it's such an interesting card, let's take a look at the auction for that particular card, remembering that in a real game, players don't even know which card it is because they're all face down. The last auction was won by the fashion designer. So he begins the auction for this card. And he has 5 francs available. The roll is a 4, so he bids 3 francs for that card. We mark it here. Next is the movie director. When you have 1 franc, you bid that automatically. Of course, he's not going to win it. Chief of police has 1 franc, so he will not win it either. And then you have the journalist. He has 3 francs, and that's the most he could bid, and the die roll is 3, so he only bid 2 francs. The cabaret impresario cannot bid at all, so the fashion designer wins that card. So we place that die here to signify that. He's won 2 cards already, and that will cost him 3 francs. So I change this 5 franc coin, and he has 2 francs left. So he's won that prison break card, and I will continue auctioning the 2 remaining cards. We have the final results of the bidding. We saw the movie director and the fashion designer each taking 2 cards. And that last intelligence card was taken by the journalist. The chief of police couldn't bid because he had a full hand. Now, before the end of this bidding phase, the cabaret impresario will use his special ability to discard 1 of the cards in his hand, and he will discard this resistance card. And we've run out of cards in the action deck draw pile, so we take all discards, including this resistance card, and we shuffle the deck. So we have a new draw pile, and we take the top card, and it's a treachery card. So now that card will be added to the hand of cards of the cabaret impresario. So now he can launch an attack on a headquarters, or at least attack a non-headquarters space, and has a powerful 3 card. And the cabaret impresario has lots of units on the map. So on to the player turn phase, and we begin with the player with the initiative, the cabaret impresario. And notice that at the end of this turn, this event will take place, and the cabaret impresario controls the airport and both train stations, and of course he's not going to abandon these just because this event calls him to discard a card. So he'll keep his units there. And of course, it's time to be unpleasant to one of his colleagues. So the cabaret impresario will move 1 unit from the train station at Tuileries at large into République, together with another of his units from his headquarters, and his unit at the cabaret location at La Villette will join in. And to not leave that location empty, he will move both of his units that he has at the Paris Opera into the metro station there, and they will reappear at the metro station in La Villette, from which they move into the cabaret location there. And now the cabaret impresario announces that he will be attacking the journalist forces at their location there. The cabaret impresario has 3 cards to use. He could use a treachery card or any of these raid cards. Now, these raid cards are pretty valuable if you want to attack a headquarters. So what we will do is he will announce that he will use only 1 of the cards. So we just shuffle the cards, and to keep this interesting, cabaret impresario places the chosen card face down on the map. Now the journalists have to choose if we're going to play 1 or more cards. He has 2 3 cards, which are powerful. So he has a maximum of 3 cards he can play. On a 6, he will play all 3. On a 4 or 5, he will play 2, 3 or 2, 1, and on a 1, no cards. And the roll is a 5, so he will play 2 cards. And what we will do is we will select them randomly. So we just shuffle them around, and select 2 cards. Now let's see the result. So the Cabaret Impresario lost his 3 units. The journalist lost his sole unit occupying that location. And the effect is that the journalist doesn't have control dominance. That's important for the journalist because he only receives 2 francs per turn, and control dominance would give him 1 during each turn where he has all 3 journalist locations. Next is the fashion designer. Fashion designer just retook his headquarters. He wants to reinforce certain locations like that movie director location at Montparnasse, so he'll move one of his elite units there. And he wants also to reinforce his fashion designer location in the adjacent Passy district. So he will also move another elite unit there. Next is the movie director. He only has 2 cards, a raid card and a resistance card. The resistance card is not playable at this time. And he will move both of his units that he has in the Paris Opera to the metro station in that district, and those units will reappear in the metro station here at Passy, from which they will move to the Arc de Triomphe. And he also moves his unit at Notre Dame to the metro station at Ile de la Cité, and that unit will reappear in the metro station here at Ménilmontant and into the fashion designer's location there. Next is the Chief of Police. The Chief of Police has a special ability that any suited card can be a raid card, but he has this problem of 4 denunciation and resistance cards that he can't get rid of. So he can just attack with this treachery card, but he can't take back his headquarters because he needs a raid card. And he has 5 of his units at Notre Dame poised to take back the headquarters, but just no luck with the cards. So he'll stay put for now, hoping that the next Shadows card is that Gestapo or FFI card. Next is the journalist, and look at the problem he has. To play this card, he has to have control of the airport. He doesn't, so this card is just burning 1 space in his hand, but he doesn't have a problem with a full hand size at this moment. This card is again unplayable because nobody is moving after him. The Cabaret Impresario has had the initiative in the last 3 turns, and so he's always the last player. And he has this treachery card with which he can launch an attack. Problem for the journalist, he doesn't have a lot of forces on the board. He's holding on to the Chief of Police's headquarters. And of course, that only infuriates the Chief of Police. His own headquarters has 3 units, and the Chief of Police has a strong elite unit nearby. So he cannot attack anywhere, and he doesn't have a lot of units to defend with either. And as you saw before, the journalist's location at République was cleared of units after it was a tie and all attacking and defending units were eliminated. So that means the journalist wants to retake that space in order to have complex dominance. So he moves one of his units from the Chief of Police headquarters to the journalist location there. And in order to forestall any future attacks on that location, he will move a 2nd unit from the Chief of Police's headquarters there. And in order not to leave the Chief of Police headquarters unguarded, he will move a unit from Wehrmacht Central, which we see no utility in being there, to the metro station there at the Opera District, and it'll appear here at Ile de la Cité, and moves back into the Chief of Police location. It's the end of the player turn phase. We move on to the plot and turn resolution phase. Now each player who has any forces in a train station or airport must discard 1 card from their hand. And the Cabaret Impresario is the only one who has units in these spaces, as you see there at Le Bourget Airport, as well as the train station located at Les Tuileries and the train station that is located here at Montparnasse. So the Cabaret Impresario, who has had a full set of cards until a while ago, now he will discard one card, and it'll be this denunciation card. So now he has 2 cards in his hand, so he has space to purchase 1 or 2 cards in the next bidding phase. Now we end the turn by advancing the Allied Liberation marker 1 space. And that's the end of turn 9, and that's where this video ends. Here we see the situation on the map. Forces jockeying around for control of locations. Very few locations remained empty, as you see there, all 3 Abwehr locations on the map. And it seems that the Cabaret Impresario will have the initiative for many turns to come. No alliances yet. In this game, alliances are defensive in nature. You cannot use cards of an allied faction in attack, but only in defense. And only alliances can be formed if a Shadows card, which is an air raid card, is drawn, and that hasn't happened yet. So stick around for the next 2 turns of Streets of Shadows. This is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.